The oldest political party on the African continent, the African National Congress, is in deep trouble. Having enjoyed a parliamentary majority since 1994, the ANC has, for the first time, lost its parliamentary majority. Now, this is very huge, especially when you consider how influential South Africa is, not only in the region, but the entire African continent. Mzansi is a giant, not just a regional giant, a continental giant. Egypt, Nigeria, and South Africa are the three largest economies in Africa. In fact, the South African economy is 2 times bigger than all the SADC economies put together. Mzansi is a giant, and it matters to the region and indeed the entire continent what political party runs the affairs of South Africa. So that's geopolitics 101 right there. But really, if there is any government that is most affected and dejected by the ANC's poor showing, it's the ZANU PF government. If there is any political party that has benefited more from the foreign policy of the ANC government, it's ZANU PF. Take a look at this tweet from the Zimbabwean Information Secretary, Nick Mangwana. He goes, Pakaipa, translated, OMG, this is bad. This is bad, real bad Michael Jackson. Now mad, real mad Joe Jackson. Kutonozwa kwa chauruka. How the mighty have fallen. Pidigori majority yaenda. Wanga wasinyanya kuvaira. Fellow Sadzaitas, slay queens and bingers, socialites, papalites, vasinamalites, varikudya rice, never sinama rights. Welcome to the special report. Jacob Zuma wanted to do to the ANC what Xavier Gasukwere tried to do to ZANU PF in 2023. But you see, ZANU PF left nothing to chance. ED knows too well that in a vicious political fight of a factional nature, anything can happen. Even the winner of that political fight won't escape unscathed. ZANU PF did not display a wait-and-see attitude on Gasukwere, no. They dealt with him decisively. On the other hand, the ANC not only underestimated Jacob Zuma, they were very clumsy in the way they dealt with him. Firstly, they ignored him when he first announced that he was backing the MK. They insisted that they didn't want to give him political relevance and mileage by responding or taking action against him regarding his ANC membership. Then, with less than a month before the election, they started talking about him and even summoned him to a disciplinary hearing. They were now freely giving him the relevance and political mileage that they claimed to have been denying him since the formation of the MK party. Fast forward to the election, the MK is now the 3rd largest party in South Africa, having overtaken the AFF. And the ANC has, for the first time since 1994, failed to get a sole electoral mandate to form government. So now, the only way the ANC can retain the presidency is via a coalition. Like I explained a month ago, South Africa is a parliamentary democracy. The South African presidents are not directly elected by the electorate. Whichever party has a majority in parliament becomes the ruling party. It's the same system Zimbabwe used to have from 1980 to 1987. Yes, from independence to 1987, Zimbabwe had a president and a prime minister. So, whichever party had a majority in parliament, the Zimbabwean parliament, would become the ruling party, and the leader of that party would get invited by the president to form government. That party leader would become the prime minister and leader of government. The president was a ceremonial head of state appointed to perform and fulfill constitutional duties, like inviting a leader of a party with a majority in parliament to form government. It was similar to what happens in England. When a party wins elections in England, the king invites the leader of that party to form government. And so, after independence, the Lancaster House Constitution gave Zimbabwe the same system which was first established in 1970 by Ian Smith when Clifford DuPont became the first ceremonial president of Rhodesia. And in 1979, under Prime Minister Abel Muzorewa, Josiah Gumede became the first black ceremonial president. And under Prime Minister Robert Mugabe in 1980, Kenan Banana became the first and only ceremonial president of independent Zimbabwe. And keep in mind that the system was such that the ceremonial president would invite the winner of the election to form government. However, the South African scenario is slightly different. You see, even though the party which has a majority in parliament becomes the ruling party, the president does not become president automatically. What actually happens is that after the general election, parliament must sit to elect the president. So, if South Africa had the office of prime minister and a ceremonial president, as did Zimbabwe in 1980, then there wouldn't have been any need for the South African parliament to elect the leader of government. What would have actually happened is that the ceremonial president would invite the winner of the election or the coalition leader to form government. In fact, from 1961 to 1984, South Africa had a ceremonial president and a prime minister. Parliament didn't elect the leader of government from 1961 to 1984. The ceremonial president is the one who would invite the winner of the election to form government. That's how a parliamentary republic works. You can either have a ceremonial president who acts as a head of state and a prime minister who acts as the leader of government, or you can have a president who performs both functions, as is the case in South Africa. The only issue, though, is you can't have a prime minister who leads a country on his own, because a prime minister can't be a head of state. A country needs a head of state to function because there are certain constitutional duties that only a head of state can perform. The title of prime minister limits one to being leader of government. So, whenever you have a prime minister in a parliamentary republic, there must be a president. If you don't want a prime minister, you can just have a president who performs both roles, as is the case in South Africa. So now, let's recap. South African presidents are not directly elected. The actual election of South African presidents happens in the South African Parliament, and the process is presided over by the Chief Justice. The current Chief Justice of South Africa is Raymond Zondo. Over the years, the election of South African presidents has always been a mere formality because the ANC always had a parliamentary majority. So it was always obvious who would become president. But things have changed now. There was no winner. It's a hung parliament. For the first time since 1994, it's no longer completely up to the ANC. The ANC is no longer in full control of the levers of power. The ANC will have to kiss a lot of frogs in order to retain the presidency. A coalition government means sharing cabinet posts too, and negotiations are already underway. Remember, no government will be formed before the election of a president because it's the president who appoints the cabinet. So, whatever and whichever parties go into a coalition government, one thing is for sure. The ANC's wings have been clipped. It's no longer business as usual, even on foreign policy. We all know the ANC government's foreign policy on Zimbabwe and on ZANU PF. Where would ZANU PF be without the ANC government? The ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula was basically campaigning for ZANU PF in the last Zimbabwean elections. Ramaphosa was the first president to legitimize ED's electoral victory, which was condemned by virtually all the notable observer mission reports. The SADC Observer Mission report in particular was very critical of the Zimbabwean election, falling short of calling it a sham. So what it basically means is that SADC basically condemned and then condoned the sham election, largely because of the influence of South Africa. Remember, South Africa was the first country to congratulate ED. There is no ZANU PF without South Africa. But now, things have changed. Virtually all the potential coalition partners for the ANC disapprove of ZANU PF. What it simply means is that the next government of South Africa will have elements in it who don't and won't suck up to ZANU PF. It's no longer going to be business as usual. For the first time since 1980, the ruling party in Zimbabwe will now be sharing a border with two governments that don't completely suck up to it. That is Zambia and South Africa with the weakened ANC. This will have dire consequences on ZANU PF. Don't underestimate the influence of governments that don't suck up to ZANU PF. Remember the havoc President Hakainde Hichilema caused by appointing Nevas Mumba to lead the SADC Observer Mission. That thing shook ZANU PF to the core. Mbuyaneanda's party had 4 press conferences in one day after Nevas Mumba issued that damning SADC Observer Mission report. The ZANU PF propaganda machinery proceeded to produce a documentary attacking President Hakainde Hichilema, calling him a Western puppet. The documentary was aired on ZBC and it featured leading Zambian politicians who are opposed to President HH. That is what ZANU PF does when it's feeling the heat. So imagine what will happen now that the ANC has been weakened. But of course, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. If the ANC finds a coalition partner or partners, it will remain the dominant partner by virtue of having outperformed everyone. But the point is, it will now be sharing power for the first time ever. It will no longer be completely up to the ANC. It will no longer be fully and solely in charge, and that is huge. ZANU PF will be hoping that the ANC will not give up key strategic ministries that will affect South Africa's geopolitical interests, because that will be disastrous for Mbuyaneanda's party. Well, whatever happens, I'll be here to marinate you with all the details without fear or favor, because on this platform, we say it as it is. And as always, thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoy the content, please like and share.